say only 7 died, but that's a lie. 7 were found. 7 sins. 7 bodies. Neatly arranged like verses in the sermon no one asked to hear. But what about me? I wasn't supposed to be part of the story. Just another echo in a town no one remembers. I lived on the edge of things. Watched, listened, kept quiet. Until silence became a sin too. I've tried to explain it 100 times. To cops, to reporters, to therapists who looked at me like I was holding a knife behind my back. But every time I open my mouth, the words tangle like barbed wire. So I'm telling it now, like this. From the beginning, from the middle, from the moments that burned themselves into my skin and refused to let go. This isn't a story about a killer. It's a story about a sermon turned flesh, a ritual dressed in blood, a prophecy written in film reels and fulfilled with rope and blast and silence. Yes, a film. That old movie, 7, played some part in it. I didn't know at first, but he mentioned it once, didn't he? In that tape I found, his voice like gravel soaked in regret. People think justice is fiction, he said. They think punishment is symbolic, that sins are metaphors. But they bleed, and I will show them how. He said he watched that movie in a psych ward, still trembling from what had been done to him. The world gave him trauma. The screen gave him structure. He took notes. But what he created was not a copy. No. He called it the correction. Said the film ended too soon, that the 7th sin was just the beginning. The sins haven't changed, he said, but the world has. The punishment must evolve. And so they did. Wrath wasn't just rage, it was cold calculation. Lust wasn't just desire, it was power in disguise. Pride. Pride took someone who loved the mirror more than their own daughter. He made sure she saw her reflection one last time, forever frozen in it. I know what you're thinking. I sound unstable. Maybe I am. But unstable doesn't mean untrue. It started slow. A body, then another, each one with a mark, an object, a token. We didn't see the pattern until it was too late, until it was all too neat. And me? I lived. Or so they say. But I keep waking up with dirt under my nails and dreams that end in screams I don't remember releasing. Sometimes I think there's blood in my bathtub that fades when I blink. Sometimes I hear his voice in the drain. Maybe I wasn't meant to die. Maybe I was meant to watch. Or worse, maybe I'm not done yet. Before the 4th body was found, there was Elaine. You wouldn't have guessed she'd be the first. She didn't drink, didn't steal, didn't scream at cashiers or cheat on her taxes. No record, no rumors. To most people, she was just elegant. Elaine hosted workshops, self-love seminars, she called them. They were always fully booked. She spoke softly but with conviction, like a prophet who had met herself and was impressed. The venue was a pristine white room with mirrors on every wall. The lights were soft, almost ethereal, flattering. She controlled the atmosphere like she controlled the people inside it. Gently, but absolutely. She had followers, not clients. Her office, more like a shrine, was filled with portraits of herself. There were no photos of family, no signs of anything living except for her. Framed magazine covers lined the wall, newspaper clippings, an award she had made up and given herself. A single tweet from a fading pop star calling her a goddess in stilettos hung in a golden frame. And of course, there was the mirror. Elaine didn't just look into mirrors, she performed for them. She worshipped her reflection as if it were a deity that answered only to her. I met her once. She passed by my building, handing out glossy pamphlets with her own face on the cover. She handed me one without looking at me and said, "This could change your life," as if that line had meaning coming from her lips. Her touch lingered on my wrist longer than it should have, not seductive, more like possessive, like she had already placed me in her gallery. That was 3 weeks before they found her. She didn't show up for her regular live stream that morning. Her followers panicked. Her assistant called the police. The news didn't cover all the details, but I had access. Accidental, unofficial, but real. She was found in her studio, perfectly posed, sitting upright in front of her favorite mirror, her arms tied behind the chair with silk scarves, her own merchandise. Her face fully made up, contour, highlighter, lashes, like she'd prepared herself for an eternal photo shoot. A bright ring light still glowed overhead, casting a soft halo around her head. No blood, no struggle, just a jagged shard of mirror driven deep into her chest. Clean, precise, symbolic. On the wall behind her, written in thick red lipstick, "Let thy reflection be thy prison." And then, the notebook, a leather-bound journal placed carefully beside her. Inside, affirmations, mantras she repeated to her clients. But they grew darker, more obsessive as the pages turned. I am light. I am beauty. I am all. I am God. I am above. And finally, the last page, torn and rewritten over itself. I am next. The police ignored the message, too cryptic, they said. Probably a suicide, they insisted. But I saw the handwriting. It wasn't hers. And worse, when I looked at the mirror, I swear, I saw her reflection still staring back. For a moment I thought it blinked. That was the beginning of the pattern. Each death wasn't just a killing, it was a judgment. A sermon, a lesson dressed in horror, and someone wanted me to see it. They called her a light. Amelia was the kind of person who lit up a room with just the right balance of humility and charisma. Online, she was everyone's safe space. Rescue dogs, green smoothies, quotes about healing. The world adored her because she gave them nothing to hate. But the thing about light is, it casts shadows. I knew her before the followers, before the causes, back when she still spoke about her sister, Evelyn, the beautiful one, the successful one, the one who didn't have to try. Amelia used to laugh and say she was proud. She got all the good genes, she'd joke. I got the hand-me-downs. But every time she said it, her smile twitched, just for a moment, and then it was gone. No one suspected anything when Evelyn's career collapsed. One day she was being honored for her eco-architecture. The next, she was canceled for fraud. Anonymous documents, misplaced permits, media frenzy. Amelia posted a heartbreak emoji and said nothing more. What no one knew, what I found later, was a draft email on Amelia's laptop. The file was never sent. It was just saved. It said, "Maybe now they'll see me." 3 weeks after her sister disappeared from the spotlight, Amelia vanished too. The police said she'd gone on a retreat. Self-care, they called it. But 3 days later, someone reported a foul odor near the old greenhouse on Maple Hill. The place had been abandoned for years, glass panes shattered, ivy swallowing its skeleton. They found her sitting in the center of the greenhouse, a single wooden chair, her hands and ankles bound, not with rope, but with vines. Real, living vines that had grown into her skin. They spiraled up her arms, pierced the soft of her throat, disappeared under her dress. But there was no blood, only soil. Her feet were bare, submerged in dirt, fingernails black with earth. Her eyes were open, unfocused, staring straight at a broken mirror hanging from the ceiling above her. It reflected her face and the video screen in front of her. Someone had set up a small projector. It was playing a loop of Evelyn, crying, apologizing to someone off camera. "I just wanted to be seen. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." There was no sound, just subtitles flickering across the wall like ghosts. On the glass of the main wall, in dried flower petals and leaves, a message had been arranged like a funeral wreath. "You wanted her light, now rot in her shadow." The image haunts me, not because of the death, but because it looked peaceful. Like a ritual, not a murder. The vines hadn't just been wrapped around her, they had grown through her. Somehow, the killer had manipulated nature itself, or maybe not. Maybe the real rot was already inside her, and the vines were just mirrors. Later, I found a note slipped inside her journal. It read, It's not envy if you call it love. And below it, in different handwriting, his handwriting. But love doesn't destroy what it fears. Harlan never yelled, not once, even when kids tagged the outside of the library with neon profanity. Even when the city announced it would close his branch due to lack of public interest. Even when his replacement, a touchscreen kiosk, was unveiled like some savior of literacy. He nodded, packed his books, went home. But the thing about silence is, it echoes. People said he was gentle, said he didn't take things personally. They said it as if it made them feel better for forgetting him. He lived alone, in a house that smelled like old paper and wet leaves. He had no children, no partner, just notebooks, dozens of them. Stacked high, hidden in closets and drawers and under the floorboards. Not diaries, not journals, just words, thousands of them, names, incidents, insults, plans. Rage written in ink, in pencil, in blood-colored marker. Rage spelled out in perfect penmanship, but never spoken aloud. That was Harlan's sin. Not the rage itself, but the devotion to it, the quiet worship of it. Like a slow boiling kettle he never lit scream. They found him in the old library. It had been closed for months, the windows boarded, the shelves empty. Someone reported lights flickering inside. No one believed them until the smell started. Harlan was seated in the center of the reading room. An armchair had been placed under the grand skylight. The room was cold and still. Dust hung in the air like ash. Surrounding him were towers of books, stacked precariously like a crumbling cathedral. But the books had been mutilated, their pages gutted, their spines hollowed out. From inside spilled tangled reels of audio tape, hundreds of them, snaking across the floor like veins. He was dressed in his old cardigan, a cup of tea balanced on the armrest, still warm. His hands rested in his lap. His eyes were sewn shut. Not crudely, carefully, black thread, delicate and deliberate. His mouth hung open, filled with wadded pages torn from his own notebooks, choked by his own words. Above him, hanging from the ceiling by a rusted chain, was an old speaker. It played a looped recording of a synthetic voice. I am fine, I am fine, I am fine. Over, and over, and over. On his chest, pinned like a name tag, was a scrap of parchment, elegant handwriting in faded ink. You called it silence. It was a scream. The police closed the building, called it a suicide again, said he'd lost his mind. But I saw the room before they sealed it. I walked between the book towers, careful not to disturb the winding trails of tape. Some of the reels were still whispering, not playing sound, but language. Broken syllables, reversed speech, fragments of confession. I picked up one of the books. Inside was a message, scrawled across the inner spine. Anger unspoken is a fire still burning. And suddenly I realized he wasn't the only one who had been writing. This was more than a killing. It was a stage, a message, a confession that didn't come from the dead man's hands. And for the first time, I started to wonder who the real author was. She helped everyone until you read the fine print. Mrs. Langley was what you'd call a community icon, retired attorney, church patron, keeper of bake sales and fundraisers in neighborhood unity. People said she gave more than anyone. But what they never said aloud was that no one ever gave anything back without consequences. She loaned money to families in crisis, at zero interest, she claimed. But the contracts were tight, with clauses that crept like mold through your future. One woman lost her home after missing a single payment. Another couldn't name her own child without Langley's approval, thanks to a forgotten co-signature hidden in the paperwork. She didn't want your gratitude. She wanted control. I remember her voice. Warm, honey thick, coated in that patronizing sweetness that makes you feel both safe and indebted. I don't need anything in return, she once told me, but I do like to know where people stand. When she disappeared, few people asked questions. Most assumed she'd gone on one of her silent retreats. She was fond of vanishing, just long enough to remind people how much they relied on her. But this time, she didn't come back. They found her inside the old bank vault of the historical courthouse, a room she had once helped preserve. No one used it anymore. No one had the key. The door had been welded shut from the inside. When they pried it open, the air hit like a grave exhaling. Cold, stale, heavy. Mrs. Langley sat upright in a leather chair, hands folded across her lap, spine straight. Her hair was neatly pinned, her suit pressed, her lipstick uncracked. But her eyes were wide, too wide, and her lips stretched into a grin so forced it looked like it had been stapled there. Around her were shelves of old documents, deeds, testaments, legal agreements, all bearing her annotations. Scattered at her feet were jewelry boxes, coins, heirlooms, none with her name. Everything organized, cataloged, possessed. In the center of the vault stood an antique scale, a symbol of justice. One side held a large brass key, the other, her heart, removed, perfectly intact, resting like a jewel on a velvet cloth. Above the chair, etched into the steel wall, was something sharp and deliberate. You wanted it all. Now it's all yours, forever. The police said it was staged, some bizarre ritual suicide. But when I looked closely, I found something wedged between the pages of a torn contract. A note, typed, not handwritten. Ownership is not love, it is fear, dressed in generosity. I remember stepping back, the silence of the vault pressing against my ears like water. I could still feel her eyes on me, wide and glassy, begging not to be forgotten. Or maybe, to be remembered exactly like this. The woman who wanted to own everything, trapped forever with what she claimed. Alone, weighted, measured. He taught people how to feel. That was his gift, or so he said. Mr. Arlen wasn't a famous playwright, or even a particularly good one. But he had the voice, the gaze, the air of someone who made emotions happen. In the right room, with the right lighting, people swore he could make you cry just by tilting his head. He ran workshops, creative immersion he called them, half acting, half therapy. Mostly women, always women, young, eager, vulnerable. They left glowing, or hollow. He never touched anyone, never said anything wrong. That was the genius of it. He gave you just enough. A compliment too precise, a gesture too lingering, a silence that invited confession. And when you gave yourself, your secrets, your admiration, he stepped back. Not cruelly, just. Enough to let you think it was your fault for needing more. I met someone once who said she felt like a character he'd written and then abandoned mid-scene. I didn't understand what she meant. Not then. They found him on a stage. An old theater, closed for years except to ghosts and dust. The curtain was open, the spotlight on. Mr. Arlen stood center stage, upright, arms outstretched. At first, they thought he was performing, but he wasn't moving. Thin wires, so fine they were almost invisible, held him in place. One at each wrist, one around each ankle, and one cinched tightly at the neck. His limbs were too perfect, his mouth slightly parted, his eyes painted open beneath a tragic theater mask. He looked alive. He looked like a puppet. Around him, scattered like forgotten scripts, were torn letters, pages from journals, emails, handwritten notes, all addressed to him, all from women, some desperate, some furious, most unfinished. At his feet, a box of stage props, lipsticks, perfume bottles, a silk scarf, a lock of hair. And in the front row, mannequins. 7 of them, dressed plainly, each seated with hands on their laps, their heads tilted slightly toward the stage. Their faces bore no features, but somehow they looked expectant. On the back wall, painted in red across the stage backdrop, you performed love, but the audience bled. Inside Mr. Arlen's jacket, sewn into the lining, was a folded piece of parchment. It read, "Desire is not a crime, But what you did with it was. The authorities dismissed it as some elaborate suicide, a tragic artist, a lonely man unraveling into madness. But I saw the wires. I traced one backstage, behind the curtains. It was tied to the rafters with surgical precision. No man could have done that alone. And the mask wasn't glued. It was sewn into his skin. This wasn't performance. It was punishment. She never raised her voice. Margaret Dawson was the kind of person who spoke in lowercase, soft tones, gentle nods. A woman who moved through the world like fog, present but untouchable. She worked as a social services coordinator for over 30 years, helped, advised, filled forms, filed reports. But she never acted, never intervened. Not when a child showed up with bruises from falling. Not when a teenager begged to be relocated from her uncle's home. Not when a woman arrived with her baby and no shoes, asking for help while her husband waited in the car, fists clenched on the steering wheel. Margaret always listened. She took notes. And then she let things take their course. "We can't save everyone," she'd say. "Sometimes the best we can do is nothing." She believed that, or maybe it was easier than believing anything else. She retired without ceremony. No farewell party, no headlines, just silence. When they found her, she was seated in her old office chair. No signs of forced entry, no blood, no struggle. She was simply there, frozen. A television screen flickered in front of her, snowy static, hissing softly, echoing through the abandoned building. Her eyes were open, her hands lay on the armrests. Her mouth was covered with a single strip of duct tape. Her wrists and ankles bound gently, not tightly, just enough to make movement inconvenient. Across the room were stacks of case files, old, yellowed folders, each stamped with one of 3 labels: ignored, closed, deferred. There were photos inside. Children, women, men, names she had written, faces she had known. On the wall above the television, in red paint, uneven but deliberate. You watched, you waited, you did nothing. The most disturbing part wasn't the body, it was the recording. The TV screen shifted from static to images, blurred footage, low-quality videos, faces looking directly into the lens, crying, pleading, some barely able to speak, some just staring. They were her cases, people she'd seen. One girl said, "You told me I'd be fine." A boy whispered, "You said someone would come." Another, older now, just said, "You looked at me like I was already gone." The reel went on for 20 minutes. None of it was public record. And inside one of the folders, tucked beneath a faded intake form, was a note. Typed, folded twice, unsigned. "Silence is not mercy, it is permission." They ruled her death natural. Age, isolation, stress. But I saw the tape. I saw the way her body had been placed. The way her hands had been positioned, almost relaxed. The way her eyes were pointed not at the screen, but at a small photo pinned just below it. A girl, 8 years old, missing since 1997. Her name was Rachel, and Margaret had been the last to see her. Chef Roland was always smiling. That was his brand. Warm eyes, messy apron, a laugh that sounded like boiling water. He hosted a local TV segment called Taste and Tell, where he made rustic meals and told stories about his childhood, his travels, his grandmother's soup. But the stories weren't real. He'd never left the state. His grandmother died before he could speak, and most nights he ate alone. Cold takeout, canned wine, a folding chair in a silent kitchen. He cooked for others, yes, big spreads, beautiful meals. But when the plates cleared and the guests left, he devoured what remained. Not from hunger, from panic. He said food was love. But really, food was proof. Proof that someone had been there, that they'd wanted something from him, that he mattered, at least for a few bites. They found him on the banquet table, not in it, on it. The school kitchen smelled of spices, citrus, and something else, something metallic. Chef Roland lay flat on his back, dressed in his white coat. His face was calm, almost serene, mouth slightly parted. His fingers were stained red and brown. His belly had been opened and filled, stuffed like a roast, with bread, herbs, lemon slices, and small colorful candies. His chest was blazed with honey. Around him were 12 place settings, each with a different dish: braised duck, caramel tarts, foie gras, fake pudding. None had been touched. The room was perfectly clean, no signs of struggle. But beneath the table, a trail of sugar granules led to the pantry. Inside, shelves were bare, except for torn packaging, shattered jars, and teeth marks and everything. He had tried to eat everything. A note was pinned to the wall, written in what appeared to be dark sauce. "You weren't hungry. You were hollow." A small mirror sat at the foot of the table, tilted upward. His reflection stared back, crumbs clinging to his lips, something like a tear dried on his cheek. The oven had been left on low. Inside it, beneath the tray, was a half-burnt note. I pulled it out with tongs, careful not to tear it. It read, "What you craved was never food, it was being seen." The medical report called it self-inflicted trauma during the psychotic episode. But I don't believe that. No human hand could have folded him like that. No one could have arranged the meal so flawlessly while dying. And the timing. How did the camera in the corner turn on only after he'd stopped breathing? It recorded the whole thing. Not his death, his emptiness. I've stopped sleeping. It's not the murders, it's the patterns. I dream in circles now. Rooms with no exits, doors that open to mirrors. I wake up with ink on my fingers and the names of the dead echoing behind my eyes. I speak them sometimes out loud as if they're mine to say. 7 sins, 7 bodies, 7 messages written for me. And yet, I'm still here, alive. Why? I've replayed every detail, every room, every horror scene staged like a confession. The silk, the vines, the wires, the fire, each one a symbol, each one a sermon, each one a whisper meant for someone who would understand. Someone like me. I wasn't supposed to find the files. They were left in a locker, anonymous. 7 folders, no covers, no order. Just photos, reports, blood-stained evidence logs. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Then I realized they weren't just crime scenes. They were invitations. I was being given something, a puzzle, a privilege, or maybe a test. The last folder came this morning. No file, no name, just a single sheet of paper, folded once with a red wax seal. When I opened it, I expected a new sin. Instead, I saw my own name, typed neatly, centered on the page. No title, no accusation, just a signature at the bottom, one I've seen before, a single initial, R. Below it, 3 sentences. You watched them fall, you wrote it all down. Now it's your turn to confess. I thought it was some kind of trick, a message meant for someone else. But then I looked around this room. The photos, the notes, the recordings, all mine. I have documented every death, every symbol, every whisper of pain. I've analyzed the killer's work like scripture. I've narrated the horror like a bedtime story. Not for justice, for understanding. Maybe even for satisfaction. What does that make me? They say wrath is fire, envy is poison, pride is a mirror. But what do you call the need to see everything, to feel everything, to understand horror so deeply that you forget it's real? What sin is that? The 8th, maybe. The one we don't name because we all carry it. The letter didn't ask for repentance, only acknowledgement. It didn't say what would happen next. But the light in this room just went out, and I can hear someone moving behind the door. So, I'm writing this, fast, before the silence takes over. If you're reading this, don't look away. Don't pretend you didn't enjoy it. Don't lie to yourself. Because maybe the eighth sin is listening.